Thank you everybody again for joining today's call. Today's call is with Trina Bolton. She is a program officer at the U.S. State Department's Bureau for Educational Cultural Affairs Sports Diplomacy Division. Today's moderator is going to be Bill Knapp. He is a transplanted New Yorker living in DC. He is the husband of Jean Millbauer, who is an active Maccabi USA parent, fundraiser, and organizer. The three kids are all Maccabi USA gold medal winners, 2 in soccer and 1 in basketball. He is the thinnest person ever to play the position of left tackle in college football, and now he tackles politicians as a longtime political consultant.
Great, thank you, Steve. Trina, welcome. Great to have you. Thank you for giving us time. All right, I want to start with a very serious question. What's your favorite sport and why?
Oh gosh, so I personally don't look like a big jock, but I run. So I ran cross country, and there's no balls involved. I don't have to work with anyone else. It's just, I am the prize, just run. But as a fan, I'm a big DC United fan. So soccer, football, the global sport, but really I can get into anything as long as it's exciting and it brings people together and there's sweat involved and passion. So you name it, I'll be at an ultimate frisbee game, I'll be at a WNBA game, anything and everything really. But
Awesome.
DC United's got a special place in my heart, so I'm definitely missing out this season.
Yeah, especially because there's a new stadium, but that'll be a different interview of someone else. We'll talk about that. Tell us, what is, define sports diplomacy for us? Obviously you work at the State Department. That's about relations with the rest of the world. So what is sports diplomacy and how does it work?
That's a great question. But firstly, thank you everyone for welcoming me into your community. This is a really special opportunity and I hope that you all are doing well and not missing your sports too much. So I'm in the Sports Diplomacy Office, a very small niche division within the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. So our bureau is in the business of people-to-people exchanges, collaboration between Americans and people all around the world at the grassroots level, not just the government-to-government level, but at the academic, at the people-to-people level. So we're within the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. We have culture counterparts that do arts and music exchanges, but we really tap into the shared passion and power of sports to build bridges between Americans and people in every region of the world, to use sports as a platform to reach out to a new audience and demographic that otherwise wouldn't be tuned in on U.S. Department of State messaging, and to promote our foreign policy priorities, our democratic values, disability rights, women's empowerment, conflict resolution. Sports is our hook. So sports diplomacy writ large is a movement. It's global. We don't own it per se. We are players in the movement in the field of sports diplomacy. So it's just bringing people together for foreign affairs and foreign policy making. It's not just sport for development, but it is sport for social change and sport for relationship building, especially on the international level. And for us, if we design our programs and our exchanges strategically, we do two-way exchanges, inbound and outbound. It's a way for us to support the U.S. Department of State's priorities in our unique way.
Right, thank you. Fascinating. Give us a sense of some of the initiatives you work on.
Yeah, so we describe ourselves as having 4 key pillars, but I will backpedal just a bit and say the United States is very unique. You all are probably aware. We're one of the only countries, if not the only country in the world without a ministry of sport. So my small office, since we're in the U.S. government, of course there's the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but they're a non-government entity. And there's the leagues and the federations, and that's why the United States, to a certain degree, is a powerhouse in sports, is because it's from this ground up kind of intramural level strength that we thrive on. But in terms of policy and international affairs vis-a-vis sports, our office can get involved in that. So there's no sports czar, so we get to serve in that role. But we are mandated to move human bodies and to do people-to-people exchanges. So we have these 4 key programs. We have sports envoys, that's one of our pillars. We work with the American leagues and federations, serving as the linchpin between the American community here, the American, let's see, NBA, WNBA, US Soccer, US OPC, and the US Embassy. So we work with our public affairs and cultural affairs colleagues all around the world to send American athletes overseas. They act as ambassadors of goodwill on behalf of the US government. They run clinics, there's media, there's meetings with youth groups, but all the way up to the ambassadorial level, Ministry of Sport type level meetings. And these are short-term programs, but they build into a larger strategy, and they put a spotlight on what the U.S. Department of State is doing. And we turn to our colleagues in the field to determine what theme would resonate best. Maybe conflict resolution. It may be environment and sustainability. So they're not always super big household names, but they're always role models. We do have some big names like Cal Ripken Jr., Michelle Kwan, Shaquille O'Neal, Alex Morgan, but they're always role models. So the leagues and federations vet these athletes to serve as our representatives. On the flip side, we have a sports visitor program. We'll bring youth and coaches from around the world to the United States for our short program. They don't even need to speak English. It's really a way to get to a non-elite audience. They don't have to be incredibly skilled in their game, just change agents in their community. And it's great for the Americans who get to play with these young people in whatever sport it may be. So we design these so that they're kind of in a camp setting or around a mini mega event of Little League World Series or basketball finals here, so that Americans can see what the U.S. Department of State is doing in terms of reaching out to young people, and so that these international delegates can experience a bit of American culture and life through the lens of sports. Our third program is a grant program. It's our International Sports Programming Initiative, and we have a annual solicitation where 501c3s in the United States are eligible to receive funding from our office to conduct their own 2-way sport for social change programs. So we team up with universities and other large NGOs who in turn work with sub-recipients, maybe some mom and pop type sports organizations, to do these international programs. And our fourth program is our Global Sports Mentoring Program. It's got 2 tracks, one of which is a public-private partnership with ESPNW, and it's our mentorship, professional development exchange on women's empowerment to promote the global lessons of Title IX. So our U.S. embassies recruit sportswomen, the la creme de la creme in the world of sports, to come to the U.S. for a 5-week mentorship, and they focus on an action plan that they'll put into play when they go back home. So it's all about sustainability and change. The University of Tennessee is our cooperative partner. And so this program's in its 8th year. There's 130 sportswomen. They've impacted over 225,000 young people around the world. We're into monitoring and evaluation. We're into storytelling. And so using this model, we created a cousin program for men and women. It's our Sport for Community mentorship on disability rights. So it brings leaders in the Paralympics and the Deaflympics and the Special Olympics space to the US for a mentorship. So those are our 4 key pillars. Our office is quite young. We were stood up after September 11th. Granted, the US Department of State has been leading and using sports since before ping pong diplomacy.
Right.
To promote our foreign policy agenda. And we've evolved into the current iteration that is our sports diplomacy division.
Right. Well, I know we have no Minister of Sports in the U.S., but I'm an old guy, so it used to be this guy named Dr. J. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Talk to me a little bit. You know, I have 2 daughters who played soccer, and women's sports are something near and dear to me. You help lead the Empowering Women and Girls Through Sports initiative. You talked about that a little bit. What are the challenges you see when it comes to women in sports globally as you work your job?
So yes, clearly we have our own hurdles to overcome here in the United States in terms of equal pay and equal play, and Title IX has really changed the landscape 45 years ago, I want to say, and it's really put our American female teams at the forefront of the sports kind of success movement. But internationally, the discrepancies are really stark. I mean, there's not even opportunities that I've heard of it. First, I was like, girl power, is it overrated? Do we really need to push this when I first started? But hearing about the challenges facing especially girls and women, and especially girls and women with disabilities overseas, I mean, you may be shackled to the toilet bowl if you have a disability, but really you can be out on playing wheelchair basketball and scoring. And so sports is such, to me, a leapfrog representation of if she can score that goal, if she can shoot that basket, she can go to school, she can be in the boardroom. And it's a win-win for everyone, a stronger society for all. So not just at the playing level for health and wellness and self-esteem and confidence. There are studies out there that show C-suite executives who are females, 94% of them played in competitive professional sports. So we take that narrative story, that fact, and we apply it globally. Everyone should have equal opportunity, in sports and in science, technology, engineering, math. Title IX is the backbone of the program. We have teenage girls, but men are very much a part of the equation too. So it's a he for she effort, and we involve anyone and everyone in it. So to level the playing field and to overcome the hurdles that we all face together.
Right. Right. Thank you. I love the enthusiasm you bring to that. I mean, combining sports with making the world a better place, that's a pretty good combination. So thank you for that. Talk to us a little bit about any programs you work with Israel. I'm wondering, and if you ever intersect, and what's your relationship with Maccabi and your sense of that organization and what they contribute to the mission that you have.
Well, I have deep respect for your organization, and we have, and you all are great athletes and advocates, and have, you're a part of the Olympic movement, but also have your own special activities too. So I don't know that the U.S. Department of State, we've not worked directly with you to the best of my knowledge, but we have done a work, of course, in the Middle East. And actually Daphne Goldschmidt, she is one of my friends now. She came on the Global Sports Mentoring Program to empower women. She was teamed up with Big East. Granted, she works with a men's football team in Israel, one of the top men's football clubs, I want to say. And she is one of their top executives. So she's a woman in a man's world, but she came on the program. She focused on her action plan. She really honed in on getting sponsorships for her girls club, to use the men's soccer club and to create a women's parallel, but start with girls to start training them. So she's one delegate who's come on a program representing Israel. She's wonderful, spunky, and I'm sure would love to be in touch with any of you if you're interested. And we've also done peace building initiatives through our embassies and consulates in the Middle East. We've supported Peace Players International. It's a basketball organization that brings together Arab Israeli youth in the kind of shared spirit of basketball, and very delicately designs these with the best interests of everyone involved. One of my friends in the sport and development movement, he is one of the founders of Ultimate Peace. That's an ultimate Frisbee organization that brings together kids in the Middle East through ultimate Frisbee, which is a strategic sport to use in that it's self-governed, self-refereed. So it's really left to all the young people out on the field together. So yes, we have done programming, and our embassy may be doing more on the ground. Our office is small, and I always salute our colleagues who are out in the field who are running their own sports outreach programs on the ground or doing their own targets of opportunity, say if members of Team USA, or if your organization were having some special competition on the ground overseas, then our embassy could team up and do maybe a pop-up clinic with athletes while they're in country, or something about the history of a Jewish influence in American sports, or something along those lines. It's not always actually the sport, it can be a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you travel a lot for your line of work?
That's interesting. I'm more of a home base kind of a person, home team. We don't have an extraordinary budget to jet set all around the world, but that's why we have our colleagues at the embassies. Most of my work travel is domestic. And so I'm going in to check on our international delegates while they're in the country. So I've been to Tennessee and Colorado Springs, of course, Seattle for Special Olympics, Indiana for NCAA. So I'll say I'm going to Indiana and people think I'm going to India, and I'm like, no, Indiana. And then I went to St. Petersburg for the Women's Tennis Association. Everyone thought I went to Russia. I was like, oh no, it's Florida. But in my personal capacity, I travel internationally, and I always make a point of touching base with, we say alumni, it's any of the international sports delegates who have gone through our program. It's like they've graduated. The Americans too, they're a part of our family in the long run. So I'll try to check in on them. So I've met up with some of our sports delegates in Brazil who are doing anti-drug initiatives using basketball. I've seen delegates in Mexico, Haiti. I went to a soccer program. Most recently, I was in France for the Women's World Cup, and I was in Morocco. I met up with one of our track and field alumni. So they're everywhere, and sports, as you know, is a global unifier. So so I do make a point of sneaking in some sports time anytime I travel.
Great. Why do you think sports are effective when it comes to diplomacy, and what does sports bring that traditional diplomacy doesn't?
So sports opens doors in hard to reach places and gets to a new demographic and audience that wouldn't be interested. I mean, if you send even a very well-respected, well-admired, amazing U.S. ambassador out to an event, will he garner as much interest as an NBA player? Probably not.
Not in this household.
But together, you can have a compliment. You can bring in a new crowd. You can build that message. Sports can go terribly awry if not strategically used, like I said. So we are very careful in designing our programs so that they are effective in terms of a positive social change, and that they are this very concrete way of connecting people, of promoting the global lessons of ADA, of Title IX, of bringing people together, of also showing sports innovation, inventions, sports technology and development. So any foreign policy priority that we want to push, there's a way we can work sports into it. There's also the dark side of sports, and we are very aware of that. We work with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor on mega sporting events and human rights violations and other areas. So we, in our sports diplomacy shop, we have the fun side of things, but we want to use this positive spotlight to also address human trafficking or abuse or inequality too. So there's a balance to be had, but it's really all about being strategic about making it and turning to our colleagues who are regional experts and our colleagues who are actually out at the U.S. embassies and the local staff who really know the lay of the land to make it a meaningful engagement.
Now, do you get involved at all in complex issues like doping and also, the dust up with the NBA in China last season when that occurred and issues such as that?
So it's not our specific wheelhouse. We see it, the issue come across our desk often and can weigh in, but we defer to different experts within the U.S. Department of State or within the U.S. government. So doping often goes to the White House's doping office or the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, but we're there to stay tuned in and to see if there's anything of relevance within our athlete community. Not that any of our athletes ever dope, but it is something that we like to just be cognizant of if there's policy paper moving around. And what other issue were you thinking of besides
the China? Yeah.
We would turn
to show someone can say the wrong thing and all of a sudden, poof, it becomes international.
Yeah, it's very important for our office to stay aware of these global complexities and issues around sports so that we are tuned in on our policies and that we're also being smart about our sports programs when we create them.
Right. Now, people are submitting some questions, and one question I've gotten already is, how the heck did you get this job? Give us a sense of your career path and how you ended up where you are now.
Sure, I know I feel very lucky that I'm here. And so let's see, so I'm from Atlanta in the 1996 Olympics and Paralympics, game changer. I saw Carl Lewis get his 6th gold medal, and I will never forget that moment. I said, I don't know what's going on, but this is putting Atlanta on the map. I had my Coca-Cola Classic. I was sold. And I'm also a skeptic about mega sporting events, but I was like, this is powerful. I don't know what it's done, but this is a big deal, just a kid. And then I went to George Washington here in DC and ran cross country. So I really enjoyed I got to be the team captain, and I was into running. I mean, we weren't that into running. It wasn't like we were
D1 though, right?
Pardon?
D1, right?
It is D1. And so I ran cross country, and I always loved sports and cheering for sports. And then after that, I worked at I had a job at the Brookings Institution for over 3 years. And we would get free publications from the Brookings Press. And I read a book, Why the U.S. Plays Baseball and the Rest of the World Plays Soccer. And I read it and I was like, wow, that's interesting. That's international affairs through the lens of sport. So it put it in my mind. And then I moved and I traveled a bit. And I went back to Atlanta and I worked with a refugee resettlement agency, the IRC, that was collaborating with this young team called the Fugees. So it was these kids whose parents were pretty much killing one another overseas, but they were playing harmoniously out in the parking lot. And they got really good, and they started beating the suburban kids. And so I learned about them and I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's kind of foreign affairs. I went to Carnegie Mellon for graduate school. And my capstone, I focused on the impact of the Olympic bid process on urban development. So not as sexy as sports diplomacy, transportation infrastructure development, but I was still on this sports track. And then I always wanted to work in the U.S. Department of State, but I didn't know that I was kind of cut out for like a hardcore, stiletto, high heel kind of a role. And then I learned about the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, and I was like, maybe those are like hippies and jocks. Maybe those are my people. And then I heard about the sports program, and I said, I'd very much like to be a part of that team and learned more about it, and have been there for 8 years. I've done different details in different bureaus, but it's been quite a marathon, and seems like the mileage just keeps going. But kind of an unwieldy path. I wasn't like in undergrad being like, I want to get my master's in sports diplomacy. I don't really know that it existed in the day.
Right. I don't think it did. Life can be like that sometimes. So let's say you're a soccer fan. So I guess, what's your definition professionally of an incredible score? Like, what is a successful day? What is a successful event that you end the day and you say, my, that was an incredible day?
For me personally, with our programs, it's seeing the delegates in person, which is just so powerful. And I know that right now it's not this, everything is not in person, but the relationships and, processing passports. So I'm a utility player. We'll be doing tweets. We'll be doing special like database forms and visas, all the way to writing talking points and so on and so forth. But working on the forms, seeing the passports, processing things, working behind the scenes, logistics, everything, porta potty rental at the clinics, anything and everything, working with our cooperative partners. You're like, oh, this is exhausting. There's all these, and then they're here and you see them and you hear their story and you see them with their American mentors or you see them with their peers. And then you stay in touch with them. And a year later, they said, this is my business plan. This is my action plan. I want to open up a sneaker company. I was teamed up with, let's say, New Balance or Under Armour. I want to go home and open my own sneaker company. I want to employ 20 people in my town. I'll make sure that at least 3/4 of them are women. I want to do this within the year. I want to gain this much. I want to do this pitch, so on and so forth. And then a year later, you see that happening. Or you don't. And the rubber hits the road and you have to change the strategy and you have to adapt to real cultural kind of context and reality. Say there's a big pandemic or something that changes course. But I will say it's so gratifying to see those dreams live out and to see that they have real impact in the lives of these kids. Looking at pictures, I mean, after going through so much to get tickets for an envoy to go all the way to Fiji, and then having some people scoff like, Fiji, oh, that's a vacation destination. I'm like, this is not a vacation destination soccer program. But then seeing the pictures of the kids who got to play with, say, Kobe Jones, and the joy on their face, it's priceless.
Right.
So that to me, and in the broader sense, just seeing how our work brings people together. Even here in the United States, we have bipartisan support. So domestically, there's kind of sports diplomacy at work, and how our programs can kind of uniquely fill a lot of roles at the State Department, whether it's the Stanley Cup that's coming to the State Department. How can we leverage this to share our story and celebrate kind of the local, but also the global connections that we have at the State Department in our sports diplomacy work.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And now I've got to ask the flip side of this. What do you find frustrating about your job when you're dealing with governments and foreign ministers of sports? And what are the things that you come home at the end of the day, I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this job?
Gosh, well, there's a lot of red tape. I mean, just by virtue of being in the U.S. Department of State, we're a bureaucracy. So you might have this idea, oh, I want to do this incredible video virtual experience, and it may take 200 clearances and everyone say so. And so there's that kind of bureaucratic red tape angle, which is in-house. But internationally and through our work, a lot of our embassies, I mean, they go through thick and through thin to make sure that the programs we run are in lockstep with what we need to be doing overseas. I mean, a lot can happen. Flights can be canceled. Suitcases can be lost of our American envoys. Anything and everything can happen. Lost in translation. There can be all sorts of problems. There can be injuries. I mean, it's sports, it's young people. Health and wellness is definitely a priority to us, but there's been near tragedies that we've had to go through and just been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening, but we get through it and we learn from it. We're all about the lessons learned and applying them for the future. So plenty of frustrations. Sometimes it's heartbreaking to see that a visa is declined for, say, an Afghan woman who wants to come on a program. She's a head soccer, just because consular affairs won't clear it because there's a risk of something taking place. So there's challenges, but we're quite nimble and creative, and we adjust and we roll with the punches.
Right. That's awesome. What do you talk to me a little bit about social issues such as religious persecution? Is there ever a role for you in those sorts of issues when it comes to the work you do?
For our sports diplomacy division, the way that we can address these issues is really by celebrating diversity, um, uh, celebrating international religious freedom. We have tomorrow, we have a Get Fit virtual interview with a player, an NBA player who hails from Egypt. And so he's going to speak to Ramadan and training during Ramadan. So we like to show the whole spectrum of religions and tolerance and just always promote inclusion, respect for diversity. And our embassies, I think we've worked with some embassies, I want to say in Burma on anti-religious persecution and showing that that everyone can work together and be healthy and be different too, and celebrate diversity out on the court, but also in life.
Right.
So it's less about shaming and pushing, but more about the positive unity that can come between people, no matter what walks of life, no matter what religion they may have or practice.
Right. Thank you. How has technology changed your job, and how much do you use, say, Zoom, for example, and other technologies?
That's a great question. Really, just my personal capacity when I started was about 2011, 2012. So it wasn't the Facebook, but Facebook was pretty critical. Kids would come from, you say, Congo, and they would have one phone call. Just call home and say, Mama, je suis ici. And they would use our landlines in our office. And now, I mean, no matter where young people are coming from, they have their smartphones. So of course our public affairs, I don't know if my colleague had an opportunity to join, but our Bureau's Public Affairs and Strategic Communications office are very aware of the power of digital media storytelling. With our ESPNW Global Sports Mentoring Program, we've really tapped into all, I want to say, facets of media over the years to share our story. To inspire others, whether or not they can actually be a part of our women's empowerment program. But with ESPNW, so we've had podcasts, we have a website, we have Facebook Live, we do Periscope videos of their action plan presentations. So people, no matter what, in whatever time zone, if someone wants to support someone, they will get up at 4 a.m. and watch the action plan presentation. So we have, we've grown in that space in terms of like trying to adapt to what the trends are based on what regions, what demographics, Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp. They're all quite critical in the work that we do with our partners and with the young people in the United States, but all around the world. So that's technology in one kind of very office-focused way. In terms of, say, we've worked with the Lemelson Center, the Smithsonian's Lemelson Center on Invention Innovation, to highlight kind of technology and technological advancements in the lives of athletes and in sports generally. So, I mean, you talk about a mega sporting event. Now there's ways that they can track seats and tickets and know how many sodas whomever will consume. So there's a lot of digital technology in terms of the marketing sense, but also in terms of, say, actual athlete gear. And especially in the disability sports realm, adaptive sports technology is just fascinating. And it's really picked up a lot of speed in the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Great. I have a couple of questions here I'm going to ask you from the great. One is about Cuba.
Okay.
Do you work with any athletes in Cuba? Does your office have any relations with Cuba regarding their professional players relocating to the US, which is obviously a difficult thing? There obviously are a lot of Cubans who play in professional baseball. Is that something you get involved in?
Not directly. We would turn to U.S. Embassy Havana, I think, for anything on the ground in Cuba. We have done some programs, baseball, basketball. We did send Shaquille O'Neal to Cuba. In terms of the kind of trafficking of athletes, That's interesting. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a colleague in the JTIP office, we call it. It's the Trafficking in Persons office. And they were working on our annual Trafficking of Persons human rights report. And so we would turn to our colleagues in this office to address the trading and the bartering that's going on of players in Cuba and the Democratic Republic, you name it, it's happening globally. So again, that's the dark side of sports. We are aware of it, and we will do anything in our programming that will counter unsavory kind of practices as such, but we're not the subject matter expertise in-house.
Right. Do you think we're making some progress in taking on the dark side of sports as you talked about it? And also, you did have a stint where you worked on sports as related to drugs and trying to combat drug use. If you could share a little bit about that, I think people would be interested.
So, so the U.S. Department of State, through our Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, we played a role in establishing the Center for Sport and Human Rights, which is based in Europe, but they're pretty much at the forefront as a multilateral convener in addressing anything and everything that's nasty about sports. So we've supported that, and through our different offices. I was in the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. I didn't focus explicitly on sports and drugs. So it is kind of this patchwork of players within the State Department or within the US government. Yes, I think that it is very important for us to address it. I think it was years back, it was our Department of Justice that called FIFA out on a lot. So I think it takes everyone. And I think we need to look within too. I mean, we have Super Bowl issue. There's all sorts of growth for us, and just generally in our Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, I must say it's always a two-way street. We're not just about exporting U.S. culture, and just touting the U.S. as being holier than thou in sports. It's really about learning and addressing challenges together. I do think we're making progress, and I do think it is important for the U.S. Department of State to be aware and contribute to the positive side of it all.
Now, are you in what we call a growth business? Are embassies contacting you and wanting things? Do ministers contact you with ideas and things they want? Can you get us LeBron James tomorrow? What's the?
We're definitely in demand. I will say sports diplomacy is a hot ticket. And we get requests from the field just left and right. We try to kind of funnel the enthusiasm and leverage it, but we've tried to systematize things through our internal cables, and no matter what, and it might even just be based on an individual at an embassy who's like, I wrestled in high school, I'm going to have a wrestling program. And we're like, make sure that the foreign policy priority is the key theme, not the wrestling. But if you can make them come together, that's what we're all about. So yes, and there's also targets of opportunity. So our embassies at any given moment may say, hey, there's a team that will be in town, a US team that will be in town for a competition or pre-trial before Olympics or Paralympics. Can you help us do a 3-hour efficient, economical target of opportunity outreach program that builds into what we're already doing? And so, yes, we get requests from interested Americans, interested international coaches and youth, and interested members of just the sport and development community, and also really enthused and very capable colleagues at our U.S. embassies. Mm-hmm. Every ambassador has a favorite sport, I'm pretty sure.
I know, undoubtedly. And it's not always soccer or football, as they say. Give us a sense of like a recent program that you were involved with in another country, just to give us a sense of it, in Russia or anywhere else, like a specific program.
So I do work in all regions, and I've I've worked on all of our portfolios. Recently, actually, since we were just talking about the embassies and individuals who are really into running their own exchanges on the ground, Uganda, we've done a ton in Uganda. We have this woman who was one of the first, she was the coach of the national women's team. She's a FIFA certified referee. She's gone through our programs. We've stayed in touch with her, but we've seen a lot of collaboration. We've seen an overlap of all 4 of our pillars in Uganda. We've seen grant partners working with alumni from our women's empowerment program. We've seen alumni from our disability rights program working with our women's empowerment and grants programs. Envoys will go out, meet all of them. We'll have youth visitors. So it's really a part of a sustainable initiative. Our colleagues, I will just give a shout out for the embassy in Kampala. They recently did, I want to say 6-month to 8-month tennis program in the spirit of Arthur Ashe, and it was on HIV/AIDS prevention and education. And so it was just tournaments. I mean, we're talking on, you want to talk about playing on a lawn on a grass court, really a grass court, like fields and clay courts. You want to talk about a clay court, but really, I mean, putting up nets between 2 houses, maybe in kind of a rural village. And it was really beautiful to see how they marketed it, how they really got everyone involved, girls, people with disabilities, men playing mixed doubles, and really promoted our PEPFAR, that's also our HIV/AIDS U.S. government initiative, and got them involved. So yeah, so that was one that just came to mind because we played a role in it through our alumni, but it was a little more hands off from our office, and we didn't actually fund it. It was the embassy that funded it. So it was really fun to see that one play out and to share our sports savvy as they developed that program.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Can you explain to me the European Soccer League? No, I'm only kidding. What, someone asked, you're a big DC United fan, but I had one question came through. And, you know, this is of interest to me because, you know, global communication is now so easy. But, for example, in DC, we won the Stanley Cup, the Mystics won, WNBA championship, nationals. Do you find that as you deal with the world that they follow sports closely here? Are they beginning to think of Washington as more than just the capital of the United States?
Oh, DC sports? From the international perspective? Well, I mean, everyone wants to go to the monuments and do the monument tour and take a selfie in front of the White House. Upon landing, they're not always like, I want to go see Wayne Rooney, who's actually British, in a DC United game. But I think that we are on the map. And then when international delegates are here and we do take them to the MCI, Verizon, Capital One Center, whatever it may be, they'll get the jerseys, wear it with pride, and just be happy as can be about the nation's capital and their time here. Because when we do have international delegates, they always come to DC, but we usually have them go to another city too, so or another couple of cities, so that they can see a different part of the United States as well.
Right.
We're getting out there. The Washingtonians, I'm always like, go Atlanta too, and everyone's like, where are you from? It's like, oh. They all come through the Atlanta airport, so
everyone does.
And so I see a lot of Atlanta hats when they come off the planes, and I'm like, put that away. Welcome.
Do you what's your relationship with you and the U.S. Olympic Committee and the U.S. Para?
So they're now merged. It's now distinctly the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
Yeah.
We do work with them really to identify a lot of our envoys. And they hosted some of our delegates in Colorado Springs for 5 weeks, worked with their archives team, but essentially their DC office, we connect with them to vet a lot of our sports envoys we send overseas. And we also work with them, and especially the post who are in the host country, on mega sporting events. So of course, Tokyo Games are postponed until 2021. But we've done a lot with Team USA and the USOPC will actually embed an officer in our embassy, whether it's in Brazil for the Brazil Games, whether it was in Pyeongchang, so we can do a lot of targets of opportunity and campaigns around the mega sporting events in the lead, during, and after. So we work with them on mega sporting events, but also just everyday sports envoy programs. So
what other country would you say is sports crazy?
Oh, I mean, all fanaticism is just everywhere. In terms of like being sports diplomacy crazy, I would say New Zealand's at the forefront of like the sports diplomacy, in Australia. I mean, not to mention that they are also just hardcore sports fans if you look at rugby. But I mean, Egypt, soccer, I mean, really anyone, Mexico, Egypt, Brazilians, Argentinians. I'm trying to think of, I mean, Turkish, around the world, yeah. And our embassies recognize it.
What's the most esoteric sports person who you've sort of come to the U.S. and you brought around, or in particular a sport that you wouldn't normally think of? And has any foreign country asked for any highlight athletes to come over?
I mean, we've done, so we might do a basketball or a soccer, but we always do alternative activities. I was saying I have done flying disc golf programs, but we also work with experts in sports and sports history, our very niche part of sports history. I just talked to a young man who's focusing on the 1950s goodwill tour of some bodybuilders. And we've done a lot of Paralympic sports, so Paralympic lifting, sitting volleyball, really the whole gamut, whatever we think will work. And if it's a new sport, it can be about entrepreneurism and starting something new in your home community. We've had a French roller derby delegate come. She was amazing. And so she was creating the French roller derby league for women who really just weren't interested in traditional sports. We've had a lot of action sports. We've started focusing on skateboarding. Esports is now definitely on our radar.
Right. That's awesome. If someone is interested in seeing some of what you do, are there resources? Are there video places you can go to if you're interested in seeing and learning some of what you're actually doing?
Yes. Unfortunately, we can't keep pace with the amount of programming that we're doing to do justice to what we're doing. But yes, we have a website, our Global Sports Mentoring Program. There was such an insatiable demand for information on the programs and the individuals' narratives, stories, and the American mentorship kind of relationship with the international delegates. We stood up a separate website, separate Facebook page, separate Twitter handle, but all the same family. So we do have our sports diplomacy website, our cooperative partners at FHI 360, who work on the Envoy and Visitor program. There's several platforms that have information. I think kind of the best voices and storytellers about our work are the actual participants that go through it. So if you follow an Envoy's Twitter handle or Instagram feed when they're on a trip, I mean, that is raw footage that's awesome. And it's not through kind of this filtration process that we may have. And then through some of our delegates who are doing a bunch of selfies and just doing their whole own personal podcast of their experience in the United States, their blogs. So there is a lot out there. I wish that we could be kind of better at really showing in real time, but it's hard to do that because there's so much, and there's so much we don't know about, and it should be that way because it's about sustainability. And when our programs and the ideas get their legs and run, we can't always chase it. We do try though.
Right, great, thank you. Now, look, there's some countries where we have a little bit more of a tempestuous relationship, a little more hostility between countries. Someone asked, me to ask you, how do you deal with that? Do you work with other branches of the State Department? Do they ask you to sometimes get involved because you can come in at a different angle and maybe make some progress that isn't being made? Reflect on that a little bit.
Absolutely. We would always defer to whatever desk of whatever office it may be. Whether it's the Korea desk in the Pyeongchang Games, and would that be a peace builder that wasn't run out of the State Department, but we were watching it and saying, oh, this will be interesting. North and South Korea teams. Yes, we are called on because I think that some of our colleagues who are working on these hard topics realize that sometimes sports can be a key. It can be. We did not send Dennis Rodman to North Korea. That was not us. But yes, I don't know how much I could go into depth about those countries and what we are involved in. But yeah, sports speaks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, have you heard of, I assume you've heard of Beyond Sport?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you collaborate with them at all?
They're such a convener.
Maybe you could tell people who they are. People who
Yes, we're all friends. There's Beyond Sport, there's Laureus Sport for Good, there's Right to Play. There's a lot of big, awesome NGOs out there. So yes, Beyond Sport, we've worked with them. Some of our delegates have received their awards. They have annual awards. And some of our alumni, a young woman from Argentina, I think, was awarded with a Beyond Sport award. She has a youth field hockey program in Rosario. So yes, we are aware of what they do in their conferences. I think some of my colleagues have gone to their events. They really do bring people together. We've worked with Peace and Sport in Monaco too. So kind of these larger international NGOs that bring together the actual practitioners who are down in the grassroots of really sport for social change projects. Mm-hmm. So this was more kind of like up in the big cloud, and they bring together and they recognize and they help fund and support and share the story thematically of what the players on the ground are doing.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now, if someone's interested in learning more, or is there any way for someone to get involved in what you do? Is it a volunteer basis or in any other community basis?
Yes, just generally the sports diplomacy movement. I would route you towards Sport and Dev. That's a platform that has a list.
Say it again.
Sport and Dev. Gotcha. It's a website, but it has a list of a lot of partners all around the world that are doing sport for social change in the United States, but in countries all around the world. And so you could have a look at that. Our actual office is so small, but we work with our partners through the grant opportunities. And then if you're traveling internationally, and you want to do something special, or you know of something that's kind of a special youth sports outreach, or maybe your games that you have, we could try to put whomever or all of you together in touch with our colleagues in the public affairs section to maybe do something special overseas. And then just generally, like, there's all sorts of organizations to volunteer at if you want to coach. Top Soccer, a lot of our partners that we have here, DC Scores, America Scores. A lot of the leagues and teams and federations have their own foundation or philanthropic branches. So if you're just interested in sport for social change and getting involved directly in that front, those are all of our partners who we work with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I wish we could have everyone working in our office and have a powerhouse of 25 to 30, but it's
how many people are in your office?
Right now we're running on all 4 cylinders. I mean, it's crazy. We have 7, and our intern just left us. So 7. Full time we've been down to 1, 2.
And what's the background of the other people who are working in the office?
My colleagues are wonderful. We're not all like former professional athletes. One of my colleagues who's left, she was a Paralympian. We all love sports though. Different backgrounds. One of my colleagues, he did doping actually. He did doping tests. So he was actually handling urine of star athletes. And another one of my colleagues was at the University of Tennessee Center for Sport, Peace, and Society as a professor, and we worked in that capacity, and she's now in our office. We have one foreign service officer position. Oh, my other colleague, who's newer, because I'm thinking back to the early days, he played for the Paralympic soccer team. And then one of my other colleagues, he's like a triathlete. And my boss is lovely. He worked with Fulbright for several years, and is a dad to athletes, and like a super dad to his athletes, kids.
Right. Well, we're almost out of time. You've been very patient with your time. I'm sure you're busy. You're obviously busy, doing a lot of very big, important work. Just one other couple quick questions. Have you ever been to Israel?
I am not. And Daphne, she keeps on saying, you need to come. And I know there's some flight that's under 10 hours that I can make it. I would love to. I have not. I think the closest I've probably been has been maybe Turkey. I'm not sure.
That's heading there. That's okay. I'm sure that you would be welcomed with open arms in Israel. And I think the Maccabi folks would love for you to visit. You know, as I mentioned, all three of my kids have participated in the program, and my wife works a lot with recruiting teams and raising money for the organization. It's an incredible organization. I see firsthand, you know, building Jewish pride through sports is a big part of what it is, but it creates community and really creates a global community. And it's so I see the power of what you do in Maccabi, because I see, you know, my kids and other kids interacting with others from all over the world. And, you know, one of the most enjoyable moments was sometimes there's a gold medal soccer game, and they fight like crazy to win, and there's plenty of penalties during the game, and when it's over, they take off their jerseys and trade them, and they share so much. So I really understand the power of sports, and, you know, thank you for everything you do. You know, it's a complicated world out there, and you're working really hard to make it a better place, and it's people like you who are going to help succeed in doing that. So thank you all. Steve, I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover, but again, thank you so much for your time. Really. And